and so on. Sorry. Yeah. So I was just mentioning that I can't tell because I can't see most of the participants' faces, but I'd like to hear more from some of the younger persons in the room. Not that that I'm discriminating against us older folks, but certainly I'd like to hear from some of the younger folks in the room. Is there any young person in the room? Let me just ask it that way.
Yeah, the TikTok generation, right?
Yeah. I think there was a CARICOM youth ambassador in
He's on Zoom.
Jason Clark. And we have somebody here, but he's outside right now in the break. And he also has his origins or roots of the fusion of Indian and Grenadian, because we were concerned about not funding the representation of the Indian community. And he just shown us the photos of what does his, well, literally the physical photos, which is a type of archive, some rituals that they do. I do, and I currently ICH elements. So he's in the break, but when he arrives, I would like to introduce you to him.
Okay, sure. All right. So young folks out there, if you want to share any perspective at all, please do so in chat or raising your hand or whoever. Janelle, no? Janelle, are you a young person? I'm just seeing Janelle's eyes.
But Nigel, you have to define young, you know. I consider anything that's not retired as being young.
Well, me too.
Okay.
No, but I mean, certainly our youth, if you have any youth involved, no, students and so on, feel free to share. Don't be intimidated by us older folks here. You'll share whatever it is that's crossing your mind. Right? So Ezra, did you finish with that? Did I interrupt?
Yeah, I was saying that those video clips that folks have captured could be added to a repository, because they may have visuals and audio that are relevant to the ICH work we're doing.
Okay, got you. So please drop those links in the chat as well.
Just give me the pictures. But just come.
Oh, so we have someone there? We have a youth?
Let me.
Start video. Yeah. You have the pictures? So you want to describe what's happening here in this picture?
So that's one of the traditional celebrations of some of the Indians here in Grenada. It's they usually have this Indian dance when their son's having their first haircut. It's usually around when they're 5 years old, and everyone would gather around for the cutting of his hair. So they'll cut it in portions, so pieces at a time. So each time they cut a piece, they'll do the ceremonial Indian dance, and until all of the hair is cut off, which they'll actually save and they'll put into a cushion-like ornament that they'll keep in the houses. So it's usually a very grand celebration, and bring into consideration the music, the cuisine, the dance, and so forth.
So that's an ICH. Rituals associated with what? What would that mean? How would you describe that?
1 second.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Could you come closer to the so we could pick you up more clearly? How would you describe that for those of us listening? How would you describe that as an element of ICH? What would you call it? What is it called? Putting you on the spot, right?
So it's actually one of the traditional celebrations with one of the Indian communities.
Could you come a little closer? I'm not hearing you. Sorry.
Oh, yeah,
Oh, okay.
yeah. Yeah.
Is that okay?
Yes, sir.
Darren doesn't bite, you know?
Mm.
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead. Sorry.
So yes, it's one of the traditional celebrations in some of the major Indian settlements in St. Patrick in Grenada. So namely Red Mud, the Gopis Fountain. And that's one of the traditional ceremonies that they usually have. Well, it's always held up with the cutting of their sons, the first cutting of their sons here.
I see. No, when you say Indian, right?
Sorry.
Are we talking East Indian?
Yes.
East Indian. Okay, from with roots in India.
Indo, say Indo.
Yes. Okay. Because I know in some places when they say India, I'm just asking, no?
Amerindian, right?
But yeah, you mean Amerindian. All right, excellent. All right. So you see yourself being involved with this whole process of being able to document and inventory the cultural elements in your community. Can you picture yourself being involved with that?
Sure, gladly.
Okay, good. So thank you for that then. Adriana has recruited well. So thank you for sharing, no? And for bringing that picture. Thank you.
I have a question. and what the demonstration we just had makes me ask it. Children on PM come here for school every day. Some children, I should say, primary stays. Does it matter where you would present and have a conversation with young people about ICH? Because I would imagine that they're one way at home and another way on the island. It just makes me want, on Carriacou, I should say. I just wonder if place and time and context change things as we think about and contemplate how to talk to young people. Does it matter that we catch them while they're on Carriacou at school, or does it matter that we come to them where they are? Because there's always the argument to be made quite convincingly that it's best to talk to people in their own environment. This is a different scenario, but it just brings the question to mind. I don't think it's a problem. I'm just curious to know if there's any wisdom out there about it that I've just not heard about.
Well, I'm sure the fact that you raised it, you've thought about it to some degree. Because, for example, this project involves children from school, you'll clearly want to get not only the consent of the school and the principal, but the consent of the parents to be engaged in this process, no? So that's something to take care of on that end. In terms of dialogue with young people, you may have to, there are many ways to do it, you know. The school environment when they're among their friends is one way, because that the children reinforce each other, and it provides a natural safe space to bring them into an environment like this one, for argument's sake, surrounded by a bunch of adults talking in this sort of language, might not be necessarily beneficial. You might want to reduce the number of adults involved, no? Because it might be an intimidating space, right? But there's also, because of the work you'll be doing, you'll be interacting a lot of family settings as well, where youth are involved. And so that also helps, no? So there isn't a catch-all for it, but there are just certain things to remember Right? And one of the
I'm sorry.
And one of the best ways to learn about interaction is to first listen, no? And listen to the language, because a lot of times we will use terminologies and that it's just not registering, right? So you have to find different ways to ask the question or deliver the message or whatever, no? That sort of thing.
There's that, and then just to maybe add to Adriana's question or query yesterday about PM having their own set aside, is that, you know, it's a community effort. If only part of the community is here, meaning the children in school, then that's only part of the community. So when we talk about public awareness and communication with the community, then I would say that's a third element, if you follow along with that. I just don't think it's one of those things where I've seen 1,000 times. Maybe people from Carriacou might help me with this. You know, there's the cookie cutter approach. There's Grenada, and then there's Carriacou and Petit Martinique, as if it's all one place, and it's not. They're two different places. Legitimately so. If the water doesn't convince you, you know. So it's just something I want us to bear in mind, that we're not a collective unit or up here, I should say.
That's correct. One of the slides we looked at earlier makes that point, no? Context, you go from one home to the next, the context will change. One community to the next, the context will change. One of the beautiful things about doing this sort of work as you go forward, you'll have to be pliable, no? Meaning you'll have different sets of experiences, and you yourselves will learn how to navigate that, no? You will develop the skills for navigating different communities, different contexts, and so on. But there's something important you just said about the awareness part. If you can do a general awareness approach for the community at large, especially with this particular project, and I know that's a part of it, that will help with getting people to think about what to expect as the project unfolds, no? Because it's a we culture, it's we want to safeguard what is ours, get people thinking in those terms, and that will make things a little bit more manageable, no? All right. All right, so let's proceed then to our final unit for the day. The topic is safeguarding. Can you see the presentation, the PowerPoint there?
Yes, yes.
So we'll be looking at defining safeguarding and what we have discussed so far, and discuss it further. The types of safeguarding measures, addressing
Nigel,
threats. Yes, sir.
I have a request. You have the following, the second slide also up, and it makes the first slide a little smaller than readable in our room.
Sorry. Sorry. No, one second. Yeah. Is it okay now?
No, you're still seeing two slides.
Oh, sorry. Okay, I know what it is.
Yeah. Right. Beautiful. Thanks.
All right. So we'll be looking at the types of safeguarding measures, addressing threats and risks to viability, this issue of viability, and what we call safeguarding plans. No? So how do we define it? Safeguarding means ensuring the viability of ICH while preserving its values. And we're talking about in the current context and from one generation to the other. No? So what are safeguarding measures? Those are actions taken to promote ICH in general or to revitalize specific ICH elements. All right, so this is for the focal points. When you think of safeguarding ICH, inventorying is one exercise and so on, but once you've gone through that and we already established that that's a continuous thing anyway, you'll have to begin to think about specific safeguarding measures with respect to particular ICH elements. So there are two ways to think. There are two categories of it. There is the macro category, where as a whole, the focal point, the state, the NGOs are involved in safeguarding of ICH in general, meaning there's a very vibrant, supportive environment in Grenada where the media is involved. The media reports on an element that's at risk, or an elder who is teaching a few other apprentices about an element and so on. That's the macro level, but then there is the micro level where you'll have to begin to target particular ICH with respect to how to safeguard them, no? And that's one of the main reasons you're doing the inventorying exercise, so you can understand the landscape. So they refer to those as safeguarding measures. I want to bring to your attention this concept between safeguarding and conservation, right? On the first day, there was a slide where we looked at the difference between the World Heritage Convention and the Intangible Cultural Heritage Convention. And sometimes persons confuse the concept of conservation and safeguarding. Conservation is more of a term that applies to the tangible aspect of culture. So you have the forts, for argument's sake, the buildings made from brick, or the slave houses, right? The slave barracks. Those are examples where you would apply the conservation concept. In natural heritage, the conservation concept applies to sustainable use of the environment and resources and so on, right? With respect to safeguarding, however, they use the term safeguarding because you're dealing with a more invisible type of reality, invisible in the sense that you can't necessarily pick it up and take it or restore it or so on. You're dealing with very fluid, dynamic ways of living and being and doing things, no? That communities consider to be important. So in terms of the convention, think about ICH in terms of safeguarding. It doesn't mean, however, that some conservation might not be needed as part of safeguarding measures. Let me tell you what I mean. In some communities, for argument's sake, you have central meeting spots, right? Like you have a plaza or attached house where the frequent meetings are held, or if someone in the village is getting married, that's where the wedding would be held. That's where the religious ceremony or church services would be held, or so on and so forth. The structure itself then constitutes a physical space in which the ICH occurs. So the ICH is associated with that physical space. And so in that case, both the conservation and safeguarding work might be necessary, no? Conservation in terms of protecting the physical space, making sure it's rehabilitated, maintained. If the thatch roofing needs change, it will be changed by the community through whatever process. If it needs to be painted, if it needs to be cleaned or whatever, that's the conservation side of it. The safeguarding side of it involves the living heritage element associated with that. So I just wanted to juxtapose those two concepts, safeguarding and conservation, no? All right. Any questions on that? No? So this is an example of the Ahayuda War Guards in the US there. It's a physical space. You see the wooden structures there. Those are gods that are carved, right? And they protect that space, but there are also ceremonies that go with it, no? So the conservation would be ensuring that that space remains intact for the community to utilize, but the rituals that go with it would be the safeguarding living heritage intangible component of it, no?
Yeah, but,
so what does it,
but
yes, sir.
how are you safeguarding that? By ensuring that
You're not
there's a
safeguarding.
viable organization that's going to outlive everybody, that has proper storage facility. I mean, how you want to just, because this is our issue.
The question in this case, if you're just looking at this example, this is the physical space is a conservation matter.
No, we understand that. You see, I understand what you were trying to explain the difference between conservation and safeguarding. But I'm just leading on from that, saying, and how do you safeguard in our context?
I see.
Because you see, because we don't want the information to disappear. So what is the, there should be like a priority. Let's say, look, the first thing you have to do is have this and this and this to ensure that this information doesn't evaporate when grandma dies.
Well, the documentation and inventorying, this is why the convention has it as an obligation.
Yeah.
That's the first thing you do. In the event that it dies, no? You have records of it.
Yeah.
Right?
Okay. What
will follow, to ensure its viability, or if it's already viable, what will follow would be deciding what measures to put in place, but with the community involved in conceiving what measures can help to save it, no?
Yeah.
That sort of thing.
Okay. So come back to an archive again. But I mean, are we leaving this to the communities alone, or is it central government? What are we going to do? This is our issue. I mean, and I know this is not direct, it's indirectly related to your slide, but at least at the end of this presentation, I think we should talk about that safeguarding again.
All right, so it's a process of negotiation all the way through. I can think of specific examples. So I remember there was this tradition of ballroom style dancing in a southern part of the country, and they were approaching their centenary, the 100th anniversary, and having different ballroom dancing groups and so on. But what was happening was that there was only one person who knew how to play the music. One person. And so what he would do is that he would, at the annual ballroom dance at Christmas time, he would play the lead harmonica, and then he would be accompanied by a guitarist and a drummer, and they would follow his lead, no? So he would tap out the main harmony, and then he would be accompanied by a drummer. They would follow his lead. But he kept asking, please, I need to teach somebody. I need to teach somebody this. So what? Yeah. And so through a process of negotiation, we determined, okay, the first thing we need to do, because he's in his 70s, we need to record the music. So we got him into our studio and we recorded the music. The next thing we did was that we went to a secondary school in the community and asked if there were any kids wanting to learn this type of music. We only had a couple of them come out because the tradition itself was, while it was a part of their upbringing, it was part of their upbringing to the extent where they would go to the ballroom and stand outside the window, stand outside the building and look through the windows of the hall, no? And look at their grandparents and so on dancing, but that was the extent of their participation. So it involved, through negotiation, identifying one or two persons who are with him and he's teaching them and so on the music. But even that is not a guarantee that it will survive. because life circumstances might take those two persons who are his apprentices, might take them, who knows where life will take them, no? And so these are some of the challenges that you will face, and there are no guarantees that some of the measures you deploy will work.
Mm-hmm.
You just try, and it's a process of negotiation and making the best effort, so long as the communities are interested in trying to safeguard it, no? Mm-hmm.
Right.
It'll be easier for some than others. Some might just need your financial support. Some might just need technical support because they have that system of transmission nailed, no? It's already viable. All right. So what does the convention say about safeguarding? State parties shall take the necessary measures to ensure the safeguarding of the ICH present in their territory. That's a state obligation. Article 7 makes provision for an urgent safeguarding list. So you'll ask yourself there in Grenada, when you do your inventorying, will you create a list of elements in need of urgent safeguarding? Or will you just do a general inventory and designate them according to the urgency, right? Designating according to the degree to which they're viable or endangered, no? Article 18 makes provision for a register of good safeguarding practices. I noticed the list that you created just now. You have a category there for good safeguarding practices. The convention also makes priority assistance from the ICH fund given to elements on the USL. So if for some reason you have this element that's endangered in Grenada, you document it, you inventory it, the communities are involved, and you want to nominate it to the international level, but you want to nominate it to the urgent safeguarding list, UNESCO gives priority to that. Elements that are in need of urgent safeguarding, UNESCO gives priority to. But the beauty of how things have evolved recently is that when you submit your application for nomination to the urgent safeguarding list, you simultaneously can submit application for international assistance for funding to help implement a safeguarding plan.
All right. I have to intervene at this point. You see, let's take Karakou again. The regatta is probably going to last forever. It might, Danny Dolan said, the numbers are getting less, but it's still such a big event. I wouldn't say it's too big to fail, but it has a certain amount of sustainability. But the boat building, it's just, and his two sons, I mean, one of them could migrate, the other one, whatever, is a old man. So the thing is, that is urgent. So we definitely have to have an urgent list here. Because especially as we're starting so late, I mean, and you mentioned the grandmother who died anyway, and the process died with her. So we need that list to highlight, because some of the things that are urgent may not be the big events, but we still don't want them to die.
That's the element associated with the bigger ICH element. So that those are associated. So since you've recognized that right away, you'll want to try and deploy as early as possible some attempt to get that skill transferred or taught, no?
Yeah.
Apprentices, however, by whatever means, no? So what do we mean by necessary measures? The necessary measures do states need, or what are necessary measures that states need to safeguard all threatened ICH elements? Not all ICH elements can be safeguarded. Your point you just made, Darrell.
Yeah.
Not all can be safeguarded. And that's a tough one. When you get immersed in this work, that's one of the tough ones you will face. You will attend funerals and you will realize that at that funeral, that element has taken its last breath, no? It's now being buried.
But you see, what this has made me realize is that we think of allocating budget for archives, a building, a storage system. But I never thought of allocating a budget to ensure that the practice does not die out. Because if it's dying out because people just find, look, I don't have time with this, I have to go and make a living somewhere, then you have to pay somebody to maintain that practice. And that's the bottom line here.
Yeah, you see, well, there's always that political element. People want to see things. They want to, where you invest in tangible things.
Yeah.
Because that's a visual reminder of what you invested in. But there's this emerging concept that you probably need. It's best to invest in people first, no?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. That might be the convention encourages both general measures aimed at creating favorable conditions for ICH, I talk at the general level, and specific measures aimed at specific safeguarding elements, no? Safeguarding specific elements, just like the both you identified. So for ICH in general, that's the state, the NGOs, that's the media, everybody is a vibrant environment, a vibrant feeling, a psychology of cultural vibrancy, of culture. And then with respect to specific elements, the boat building, the kite making, the drum making, and these sorts of things. General measures for safeguarding might include, according to Articles 7 to 15, invite state parties to inventory the ICH, adopt legal, administrative, and financial measures for safeguarding the ICH, raise awareness and foster respect for ICH, regulate the participation of communities in safeguarding activities and involve them in the management of their ICH. You know, I've seen sometimes, for example, like here, they put together these festivals, right? And no one, for some reason, no one would ever think of inviting a particular person who has a particular skill to the festival to set up a booth. But all of a sudden, it dawns on somebody when you're doing the ICH work, why don't we know about this? Right? He said, well, sir, will nobody ask me? That's all the person wanted to hear. I was the only person waiting for to be asked, right? And so the state can facilitate the involvement of these communities in cultural events, you know, right? Provide spaces for them. Measures for safeguarding specific elements. Again, you've seen some of these before: identification, inventory, documentation. You see how the young man just now pulled out the photograph of the haircutting ceremony, right? That's an example of documentation. That's an example of how he and his family establish identity as part of their culture and tradition and upbringing. That's living heritage, right? One of the practices that we deploy with teams of inventorying, I just want to mention this. The teams, you send them with, you know, you have these portable heavy duty laptops, you have these small scanners and so on. Sometimes when you go to the families to do the ICH inventory, they'll bring out an album, an old album with photographs in there. And they'll start showing you photographs, and they might give you permission to scan the photographs. You can do it right there and then, right? Do it right there and then. You save it and you get their permission to store it in the archive because it helps to inform of what the element or tradition is. But don't forget to give it right back to them. Don't take it, give the digital copy right back, right? That is actively promoting access of community heritage, no? So there's the revitalization concept. Ezra asked about bringing something back, raising it from the dead, right? Revitalization refers to bringing something that's hanging on. The revival, however, that's taking something that's gone and trying to bring it back, which is a little bit harder task. Might be possible, who knows? Huh? Protecting related places and materials. We looked at that example just now, where you have particular spaces associated with the ICH. You have, I know some groups, for example, there are particular costumes that they use, but the costumes have to be well taken care of because they're not just costumes, they are sacred. They have ceremonies where once they put on the attire, they take on the characteristics of whatever it is, no? And so those need to be taken care of because there are ceremonies associated with them. blessings and rituals that they perform before putting them on. I know of a particular dance among the Maya people, the dance of the deer. Once it starts, it's like a recounting, it's telling a story. Once the dance starts, they won't stop. The dance has to be finished. And it takes a few hours to dance that one story. It takes hours. I remember one time they said, we want to bring them on stage. We want to put them on stage so that the people can see what that tradition is. They said, yeah, okay, no problem. And so they agreed. But what they didn't realize was they had to start dancing 2 hours before they actually got on stage. And then the portion that was staged, they still had to continue dancing after they left the stage, right? So there's certain things you want to be aware of because of its importance, no? Related spaces and materials. Encouraging transmission through education and awareness raising, articles 2.3, 12, 13, and 14. Safeguarding, we're almost done. Safeguarding of viable ICH elements. Viable ICH elements may not require specific measures for safeguarding to ensure continued practice and transmission. They might need minimal support, no? Continued practice and transmission may be encouraged through general measures. So what's a general measure? Is there the carnival? Does the state promote carnival? What does the state do as a general measure to promote carnival? Is it associated with a holiday maybe?
Yep.
All right, so that's a general measure. There's a holiday. Does the state organize official celebrations during the carnival season? Yes? I don't know, no? I don't know, but I'm just asking, so you have general measures that may be deployed that will keep it viable. Maybe like the Tourism Association, maybe they run camps and educate, so those are general measures as well, no? Keep a thing viable. Assessing threats and risks. Safeguarding measures address threats and or risks to the viability of the ICH. Those are covered in Articles 11 and 14, Operational Directives 1, 2, and 7. And then you want to consider ethical principle 10, no? Here's what that is. If you are inventorying something and you identify particular threats and risks, here's the question for you. Do you have an obligation to query whether or not you should try to deploy measures to mitigate the threats and risks? You have an obligation. If I go into the community where, let's say, Shakespeare's Masque, and you inventory, you document your inventory, and you realize that there are threats and risks to this element, and the community is asking you for help, you have an obligation to try to mitigate or assist. You see what I'm getting at? You see what I'm getting at? So you see the responsibilities that are associated with this, no? Right? With this sort of thing. There is a responsibility, ethical responsibility that goes with it. You're not just there to document. You're there to assist with safeguarding. Right? Here's an example of the Voladores ceremony in Mexico. I think you've seen this before, where they have this ceremony and they jump off the pole and so on, and they swing around the pole. So it's called the Flying Men. It's a fertility dance performed by several ethnic groups in Mexico and Central America, especially the Totonac people in the eastern state of Veracruz, to express respect for and harmony with the natural and spiritual world. There are variations of it through Central America, no? Even the mounting of the pole involves specific prayers and blessings, because if the mounting of the pole is also a challenge, it requires a lot of manpower. And so they pray for protection, because sometimes the pole might fall and kill individuals involved in getting it up there, no? So what are threats to the viability? The flight of the Voladores around the pole is the climax of the ceremony. Increasingly, only this part of the ceremony is performed for what? For tourists, outside the community context. Everything is for tourists, right? Poles for the ceremony were traditionally cut down in the forest and ritually prepared. Too few appropriate trees are now available, so people are using fixed metal poles. So those are the threats. You're seeing them. Ritual preparations for the ceremony help to maintain its significance for the community. Performances by professional dancers reduce the focus on the ritual aspects. So now you just have professional dancers. It's not the ritual dancers anymore, but they become professional acrobats and circus performers, no? Wanting to do the flight of the voladores. But the ritual aspects are now being ignored. Why? Because they want to showcase it for tourists, right? Voladores safeguarding measures. So meetings were held with the Voladores groups, state and NGO support. Measures included reforestation, opportunities for performing the entire ceremony, including ritual dimensions, schools for Volador children, promoting the transmission of knowledge and skills, including ritual dimensions, no? So they saw what the threats were, and they develop measures for it. Same thing you'll be doing, right? Safeguarding measures with the communities concerned. You want to ensure, again, community participation. You want to assess the viability, threats, and risks, respecting the ethical principles. Assess commitments, opportunities, and available funds. What opportunity is there to safeguard this thing? Identify other partners. Study previous interventions. What was done before? What worked? What didn't work? Develop a range of safeguarding measures and determine the priorities. Okay, if we have X amount of dollars and X amount of resources, what do we give priority to? Implement safeguarding measures and undertake the monitoring and evaluation component of it to ensure that, and as best as possible, that the measures are addressing the threats and risks. So when you're actually in the field, it looks something like this, no? We identify the activity, who are the stakeholders, what is your timetable, just like what you did in preparing this project. Same thing you do with safeguarding measures, even for specific elements. What are the costs and the needs and what are the expected outcomes? And then you use the same sort of dynamic to gauge whether or not over a period of time, you're successfully helping to revitalize or safeguard particular ICH elements, all right? So that's it for safeguarding for today, ladies and gentlemen.
Nigel, before you run, we run and dismiss us. I think Margaret had a question about the way the UNESCO ICH framework is organized. It's horizontal, she pointed out, but in the elements, she claims it's vertical, meaning that like in a family is hierarchical. So how does, her question is the idea of vertical cohesion of an element against the guidelines that you discussed earlier in slide 9, bullet 1.
Okay, let me go slide 9, bullet 1. Here?
Slide 9?
It was in the other section. Hang on one second, I'll find it.
Before the break.
Yeah.
Oh, it was before the break?
Organizing the information.
Okay. Okay, I'm not sure I understood the question, but let me tell you why I understand the question that you asked. You're asking if there are hierarchies in terms of how elements are inventory?
No, she's saying that the ICH framework that's UNESCO is horizontal. That is, you're moving out, communicating, but within the family, it's more hierarchical. And an element in particular will be vertical. So the question she has is the idea of vertical cohesion of an element against the guidelines, which is the UNESCO guideline, which is a horizontal approach.
You see, UNESCO will not, the convention.
Margaret, is that
Yes.
decent interpretation of what you.
Well said, yes. If we oversimplify just to make it easier in case people listening aren't following the question. If I'm a hairdresser and my competitor is a hairdresser, UNESCO walked up and said, all 10 of us hairdressers here make a group. We're not a group. We don't function that way. We function within our own unit. And I'm discovering that some cultural practices, it doesn't have to be a family, it could be a village. I heard someone yesterday, I think it was, mentioned that Carnival was a village. There was more intensity within a village more than it being a centralized celebration traditionally. That's just another example. But I've found out that when you talk vertical, people were much happier than trying to create a hybrid group that they never agreed to being a part of. They've never functioned that way. So to get them to suddenly do it the UNESCO way without there being a huge incentive attached to it. That's why we don't have, for example, the Boat Builders Club of Carriacou.
Yeah.
All right. So there is no, with respect to what processes you use, there is no UNESCO way. That will determine the state, you will determine that, no? Together with the communities. Because remember,
I just wanted to make sure we're not going against a regulation by UNESCO on that, and it's not seen as creating multi-levels or whatever that language was.
No, that's why the convention says in the context of your situation, you know what the situation is on the ground. And if you organize a particular principle and the communities want to participate in inventorying, for example, you can't force them to come together, even though you might think it'd be a safe, a nice outcome or so on. You can't force them, right? You could interview them separately if you're doing inventorying. If you want to encourage the viability of the element, with the possibility of them earning income and so on, you might encourage them to come together, but you can't force them, no? That's the only downside. So, well, I don't even know if it's a downside because there's wisdom in everything, no? Sometimes you see what we think is an opportunity and you tell people, come together. No, you should come together. But then there's some invisible things at work that just won't. You'll probably destroy all of them if they come together, no?
Yep.
Right? So it might be better to leave the system and the structure as is, no?
All right, thank you.
All right, any other questions for today? And then I'd like to give one assignment for tonight. Is there anything from your end?
Yes, I have a nominee for tomorrow's homework.
All right. Yes, the dreaded nominee.
I have Peter Antoine. He's going to be a nominee for tomorrow. I think he's present.
Yes, I remember Peter.
Yes.
Peter has excitedly accepted the invitation.
Yes.
He decided himself.
He's beside himself. Dorian looks like somebody who would volunteer. Thank you, Peter. I don't see you, but thank you. So I want to just bring up this table that dealt with describing an element. So we will send this to you shortly. And your homework is describe an element. Don't go out and inventory. Maybe you are lucky to be able to speak to someone who's a knowledge bearer or practitioner. If you're a practitioner yourself, that's fine. But I would like for at least a few persons to prepare a description of an element using this guide. Right? It doesn't have to be, we're talking a paragraph here, no? Right? We're talking a paragraph. And it's a bit challenging. It's a bit challenging, but it's our first step toward what we'll actually be doing subsequently, no? So the homework is to choose an element and describe what it is, so that for those of us who don't know, we get a picture of what it is. Is that okay? Do we have any teachers? Adriana, do we have teachers here? If we could specifically ask a couple teachers to take up this challenge. Do we have any teachers in the room?
Yes.
Oh, sorry. Yeah.
Just 1 second.
Yes, we have about 3 teachers here.
3 teachers. Are they sitting there with you, Ezra?
Yeah, we have about 3.
So I'd like to turn the spotlight on them.
Could you have that iPad? Just a second.
So,
I'm going that way. I'm
Oh,
sorry.
just
Yep.
so that we get some attempts, no?
Yeah.
Made at this.
The first teacher, excuse, he's asking for the teacher.
Put your hands up if you're a teacher. But you can put your hands up.
Can you repeat the question, or what is your
Describe, choose and describe an element.
But just 1 second. Can you allow her to be seen in the?
I did not submit on the question because I'm not where my teacher had no. I'm working in school feeding actually. But of course the element that I would choose would be praise. The praise, the good night praise. And that would be a ritual.
Yeah.
And so essentially what happens is that we have to answer these questions.
I can do that one for you.
Singing, you can do that one for me? Yeah, you can. So what skills you have, singing, for example, you have the culinary aspect of it. You have to prepare certain things, fish, chicken, and bread. There's certain foods that you have. And instruments, not particularly, because it's more a cappella. But it's a voice. Voice, okay. So his voice as an instrument, yes.
Let's see if we get feedback.
Okay, I
Where it's
picked up some
located, it's wherever the deceased person lived. So it's in the home, it's in the family.
Right.
So the yard, really. Yes, persons have particular roles because they are individuals who would come early and they would say the prayers. Usually they're a group of women. Many of them would be from the Legion of Mary, from my experience in the Catholic Church, and they would lead the prayers. And they usually start at around 6 o'clock or thereabouts.
There's a ritual, there's a ritual before the actual prayers, which is the women of the village come in and they wash the body. Yes, the ritual before.
Oh, but they don't do that anymore. That's when the bodies was there, but not what your body long time now.
Right.
So
I read that somewhere. Yeah.
that okay. So
was a ritual before, like
I did not know
Nigel
that.
spoke, yeah. You get women,
okay.
the women of the village or the community will come in. The body will be lying on a table, and they'll just.
Is that Marlene?
They will wash the body in the home.
In the home. Yeah.
Oh, okay. So that's yes. Okay. So when the women come around 6, they would pray and they would do the chapelet or the rosary, and then specific ones for the praise that's different from the normal rosary prayed during regular time. So, yes.
Is that Marlene speaking?
What social or cultural functions is I guess support for the family in their time of grief. So that was a function there to console them in there.
He didn't feel it.
It didn't feel that way?
It's festive, you know?
Okay, well, yeah, okay. And how is that element transmitted? You learn. Because one of the things I find funny is that no matter how drunk the men may be, some of them, they're outside and they're drinking, but when they hear certain songs start, they would come in and they would sing so loud and be so involved and so proud to sing, you know, and I'm always really impressed or touched by that. And the other thing is the practice or transition. Is it threatened in any way? COVID gave it a hit. COVID gave it a hit because persons were not having praise as much until they started doing it online. So I have experienced a number of praise online, but some of the songs are in the old style, and so it's difficult. It's becoming a bit difficult to maintain that. So maybe we'll have to figure out how we can make it more accepting or acceptable. That's probably not a thing to do, but find some way to make it more attractive to persons of the younger generation. A lot of the traditional songs have now been replaced by choruses, and that saddens me because they have really nice depth. But and then you have anthems. You call anthems that you like Chairman on the Table or things of that sort. Sign my name, those kind of things. So they would have a hymn that they would take from the book, and then you have a chorus, which is kind of like you have the calypso, if you can draw that analogy, and then you have the soca.
Right.
And the men would come in for the soca. When the calypso come, they would go outside.
But you got the extempo.
Yeah, extempo version.
Yeah.
So that is my recollection of that particular element.
Excellent. And that is exactly, that is exactly.
Okay.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
I can't see what questions I have. Yes, you can. All right, so I guess the element that I might want to focus on, seeing as it's kind of up my alley being an English teacher, is storytelling. So let me see what the questions are. What practices, skills, or other features? First of all, community gathering, or even outside of community gathering, family gathering. It used to be a period where the elders in the family would call up all of the children, the nieces and nephews, and they would come together, whether it is in the living room or on the veranda on a specific night, and they would tell stories back in my day, and they would tell happen to a friend of mine story that has a lesson behind it or a moral behind it that the younger generation are later going to reflect on, and they might not get the message when it's first said, but by the time a year or two have passed, they're like, oh, that's what they were talking about, that's what this means, and it becomes a life lesson that they would then say, you know, my grandfather used to say, like my grandmother used to say, y'all remember when Granny used to, and those kinds of things. So it's really just that verbal passing along of messages and morals that we want our youth and our communities to continue to embody, that's being passed down by means of these analogies and parables and stories and poems. That is kind of endangered now. It doesn't happen as much. What domains are involved? Well, yeah, so oral storytelling. So we have it's pretty much free speech, free talking in the family domain or in the community group domain. Where is the practice located? Again, in the homes or in the village or in the village shop or so. Do some people have particular roles? Of course, the older people would be the ones who have the story knowledge, or sometimes it might be older youth, so maybe bordering on the 30, 35 age group who heard the stories before and decides that they want to share it in the frame that, okay, this is what my grandfather used to tell us, that frame. Usually there's food involved, there's some swallowship, as they sometimes call it. And of course, the women in the house, if there are men there and the men are sitting around and talking, the women bring out the food, and sometimes the children are responsible for helping. the woman help mommy or auntie bring out some drinks for the men, and then they sit around and they listen to the big people talking about these stories, and then they learn a little something.
Big people
The big people talking. What social and cultural functions? Well, like I mentioned, it helps carry morals, it helps carry the values of our society, and it helps carry, especially if it is actually based in reality or in history, it helps teach history in an informal setting where the children don't feel pressure to take notes and remember exact dates and exact names, but they get the general idea of this thing that happened in the past in their community, in their family, that they can embrace as part of their history without it feeling like they're pressured to learn something. They just learn it incidentally. Transmitted orally. Is it threatened? So yes, it's threatened because children right now are on TikTok, on Facebook, on Instagram, or on the video games. And they're not spending that much time interacting with their families. You come home from school, you're locked in your room. Mommy one way working, daddy one way working. Maybe every month, every other month, you might go to visit granny and granddad. So you don't really see people like that. Even in the shops now, the younger generations, you might see that, okay, this one particular bar or shop, that's the old people bar. And then this one over here, that's where the young people go, and all they want to do when they go there is drink and maybe play pool, and that's about it. So there's not that coming together of the different age groups to pass on stories like they used to be. And we also aren't having as many little community events where people outside the family might just come visit and see what it is that the older people have to say. So it's threatened in that way. So I think that's what I have to share on that.
And I just want to add something to this wonderful presentation. I grew up in a house, family house. I was part of the last generation. House was built in 1911, brick and concrete. And I remember we used to sit on the front step, the family, during moonlight, because that's a big piece of Grenada's tradition, moonlight. And those of you who remember moonlight nights, special nights. And that's when we used to do the storytelling, Brother Nancy and the Brad Patch and all of that stuff. I can't remember the details now, but those were some of the stories that were told.
Okay.
All right, over to you, Nigel. All right,
You have the floor, Nigel.
Yeah, sorry, I lost control of my mouse just now. But thank God for teachers. The two teachers there did an excellent job on exactly what will be the process, part of the process going forward. All right, so I give them a round of applause. The only thing left at the end there was for me to hear one of those stories, no? Which I love hearing, by the way. You guys do Anansi stories, no? Anansi,
yeah, just mention it.
Yeah. But so guys, the idea for tonight is just to reflect on an element, and just tomorrow morning we'll start randomly with a couple of them again to get the process, the practice of describing the element. It'll be the first phase of when we actually do the community inventory documentation work. It will help with putting together our inventories in a reasonable way, no? So we will need this sort of expertise on board. Persons who can look at these, the information that we gather, and be able to write it in ways that everybody will be able to understand, no? All right, so that's the homework for tonight. Just reflect on the elements. Think of, while you're doing that, think of Darrell's homework. What other elements can we add to the list? Are the domains that are there reasonable? We're open to amendment and suggestions and so on. And then we go from there. No? So it's very easy. You guys have stayed nearly an hour and a half later. My goodness gracious. Congratulations, you're really committed. I feel badly about the whole thing because, but you guys are committed, no? Yeah. But the discussions have been and look at the chat. Ezra, I hope you've been keeping track because there's lots of information in there, right? To account for, right? All right, guys. Any housekeeping matters for today? We will send out that sheet that was on screen just now about describing an element, no? And so just think about that tonight and come prepared to do what our two teachers, that was Marlene and who was the second teacher?
Names, praise.
It was Rochelle Finley.
And Rochelle Finley.
Rochelle, yeah.
Yeah, so come prepared to do what they were able to model for us this evening. All right. So thank you guys. And unless Ezra, you have any wrap up, and then we are done for today.
Well, I think the folks are so alive, Nigel, I think we can go some more.
What do you think, Adriana? Shall we?
Okay.
All right. All right, guys. So thank you then. And thank you for hanging in there. And we'll see each other tomorrow.
Okay. Thank you, Nigel. Okay. And for those of you here with us today, there's a buffet style lunch over at the restaurant, which you can see is that next building to the side of the pool there. So